Hi everyone. Knowing what I know now, if I was to start from $0, here's my exact plan to build wealth from scratch. Now, all of the things I will speak about in this video go beyond the usual good advice to have the right mindset, understand your financial situation, budgets, and so on and so forth. So when I've done all of those wonderful things, here are 10 actions that I would take to make a significant difference in my wealth building journey, and more importantly, to build wealth faster. The first thing I would do is maximize my work benefits. I would look to get a job that pays me the level of income that I need to achieve my goals. So the next time you are job hunting and maybe reviewing multiple offers, if possible, negotiate your pay. And in the event that it is not possible to negotiate your pay, look beyond your salary at other benefits that these companies provide that could save you money over time. Things like a workplace pension, assistance in paying back your student loan, medical, dental, and vision insurance, childcare, gym and fitness memberships, professional training and courses, and other types of benefits. I would be sure to take full advantage of these opportunities and benefits that are available to me, because some of these expenses are not small by any means. And so the capital or the funds that I save from having them provided to me by my employers, I would then deploy into my investments as seed capital. The next thing I would do, which is something that I will always say to everyone, is to start investing as early as possible and let compounding do the heavy lifting. And this comes from personal experience. So rather than trying to hit big gains later in the future, I would start small, and more importantly, I would start early, because for most people, time is the critical element that allows your returns and your capital grow exponentially. A recent analysis by the Money Guy show shows that investing about $662 per month at a rate of approximately 8% annually will get you to $1 million in under 30 years. And get this, about 82% of that 1 million will come from your investment growth as opposed to your contributions. In other words, the majority of your wealth won't come from how much you earn, it will come from what your money does after you invest it. Now take a guess as to what two assets the top 0.1% of wealthy Americans invest in. The number one asset is equities or stocks and shares, and the second is private businesses. And so as you can see, there is a lot to be said for investing, and more importantly, investing as early as possible. I would start seeing money through the lens of time. And this is what I mean. Let's say I wanted an item that cost $500 and I earn $10 an hour. It would cost me 50 hours of my life, approximately 1 week. And don't forget that $10 an hour is pre-tax. So after tax, it might take anywhere between 55 to 60 hours of my life to work to afford that item. The question I would have to ask myself is this item worth 50 to 60 hours of my life? Or could I be deploying that money or that capital towards something else that would expand over time? So the bottom line is I would cut unnecessary expenses but stick to a friendly budget, which means I can still have fun, but I do it in a sensible manner. And the thought process behind this is that this current self-imposed period of austerity is actually working towards paying for my lifestyle in the future. This is actually great practice for retirement, where you won't be able to necessarily replenish what you spend in the same way that you would if you still had a 9-to-5 job, if you were earning a salary. The next thing I would do is I would avoid debt at all costs. And if I can't avoid it, I would make sure I stay ahead of my debt. Here's the thing about compounding. It works both ways. Compounding can work in your favor by generating interest on your initial capital as well as your accumulated interest, which works to grow your wealth. But it can also work against you. And that is because interest is charged on the principal amount that you borrowed, but it's also charged on any unpaid interest. The more debt you have, the more interest payments you'll make, and this is money you'll never get back, which invariably leads to lower savings and investments. And so if you have debt, especially high interest debt, I would work on a plan to get that paid down as soon as possible, because the opportunity cost here is that it is taken away from your ability to build wealth for the future. The next thing I would do, which is tied into the debt conversation, is to consider whether or not I would start investing even if I had debt. Now, this is a bit of a controversial point, because some advisors will say pay down all of your debt first before you start investing. whether you are using the snowball method or the avalanche method. The snowball method, if you aren't aware, is a method of debt repayment where you focus on paying down the small debt first and you build. Whereas the avalanche method takes a different approach where it focuses on paying down the debt with the highest interest rate first. But personally, if I was in a situation where I had outstanding debt, there are a few things I would think about before deciding whether or not I want to start investing whilst I pay down my debt. This includes how much the debt is, what the interest rate is, what sort of debt is it? Is it student loans, credit cards, or is it my mortgage? And also, how long will it take to pay it down? Will it take me a few months? Will it take 3 years, 20 years, a lifetime, etc.? Knowing what I know now and having been an investor for quite some time, I would invest whilst paying off my debt. I would personally invest in income generating assets, and I would use those cash flows to pay off my debt whilst I focus my income on increasing my investments. But I do understand that this approach mightn't work for everyone, and it is very much dependent on your income level. The next thing I would do is I would start a business as soon as possible. When I started working all those years ago, having a side hustle or a side business wasn't common practice. For one, where would I find the time when I had to be in the office for 7 a.m. and sometimes I would work till 10 p.m. after the US market closes? And also at that time, there were several professional examinations that we had to pass for accreditations. But the world of work is a fairly different place now with more flexibility and working from home opportunities. And starting a business has never been easier or more accessible thanks to technology, AI, and also better access to capital. And so if I was starting over, I would most certainly consider starting a business, maybe an online business that doesn't require my physical presence or my physical input. According to payments.com, between 25 to 26% of people with high income, i.e. income above $100,000, have side hustles. And in the UK, 47% of Brits have side hustles. And amongst younger individuals aged 16 to 34, having multiple streams of income is actually very common. In another survey, 43% of Americans with side hustles say they make more money and work less hours than they would if they had a single job. And as I mentioned before, private enterprise or private business is the second largest asset class that the top 0.1% of wealthy individuals invest in. And so it's definitely worth exploring. Now, because life happens, I would have a funded separate account to deal with that. According to the Federal Reserve Board, around 37% of American adults couldn't pay for a $400 expense with cash. And only about 54% of American adults have 3 months of emergency savings. Everyone needs a cushion for unexpected expenses. And the more you have saved up, the less likely you'll be to rely on credit cards or high interest loans if something was to go wrong. And I would start by putting away at least $1,000. If you were to save £100 or $100 every month, it will take you 10 months to hit this target. Now, some advisors will say on the conservative side, you could have 3 months worth of expenses covered, but I say 6 months because I'm just a very risk-averse individual when it comes to making sure my essentials are covered, just for peace of mind. And also, I wouldn't put my Life Happens funds in a regular savings account. I would put it in a high-yielding savings account, so that way I'm taking advantage of better rates. The next thing I would do is to ensure that I don't get completely crushed by taxes. Taxes are likely the biggest expense that you will have to pay throughout your lifetime. So if I started investing, I most certainly would consider investing through a tax-efficient account so that all of my gains, both now and in the future, are completely tax-free. And when my tax-efficient investing account is maxed out, I would then consider traditional brokerage accounts. But therein lies one of the biggest disadvantages with tax-efficient accounts. Unlike traditional brokerage accounts, they have contribution limits and sometimes very strict withdrawal rules. But even at that, using a tax-advantaged or tax-efficient account is a strategic and a smart choice if you're just starting out. Otherwise, you are leaving money on the table. The next thing I would do is to start planning for retirement. Previously, I mentioned taking advantage of all work benefits available to you. If you are employed and your employer has a pensions contribution or a 401k contribution scheme, I would certainly take advantage of that. It's like free money. So as long as you stay long enough at that company to allow the match fully vest, you get to keep all of it. On the flip side, if your employer does not offer a retirement benefits plan, you can open one of your own. So you can look to open an IRA if you're in the US. That stands for Individual Retirement Account, or a SIP account if you are in the UK. SIP stands for Self-Invested Personal Pension. And for this sort of account, the contributions are entirely your own. You don't need an employer to be a sponsor. As I implement all of these other points, I would also treat wealth building as a habit. Many wealth failures don't come from lack of money. They come from poor money habits. And so if I was to start over, I would certainly design an environment or routines that keep me saving, investing, and learning, and not just relying on my willpower. For example, I would automate my savings or my investments, so that way I don't have to actively make conscious decisions to invest. It's already done for me as soon as my monthly income hits my bank account. And on the spending or expenses side, I would introduce additional friction to deter me from spending frivolously. For example, having a separate expense account with a limited amount of cash. Wealth building is similar to getting fit. You mightn't see immediate results, but every small action compounds. And there was a time very early on in my career where I would spend so much based on a guarantee that the next paycheck was going to come through. But over time, I nurtured and I trained my investing muscle. And as time went on, I noticed that it became a lot more difficult to freely spend my salary like I would in the past. In fact, I developed a small obsession with investing. And so every pay rise I got, every bonus I got, went towards building my financial future. Because the way I saw it, spending that additional income or my bonuses was like stealing from my future self. And that no longer sat well with me. So there you have it. Those are the 10 things I would do if I was starting from zero and I was building my net worth from scratch. And you certainly don't have to do all of these 10 things. Even one or two things can really make a significant difference and move the needle in your wealth building journey. I hope this video has been helpful. I'll see you in the next one. Look after yourselves.